for heading out to the February edition of the VSBA board meeting. As folks know, we have a pretty packed agenda. So I do want to just remind folks, to the extent possible, we'll try to be efficient with our time this evening. And I say that as I thought I had the agenda up and was looking right at it, and now I can't find it. Hang on one second. But I think the first item on the agenda, Sue, is our interview candidates for the employer commissioner seat, right?
Yes, that is the first item, other than call to order and review of the agenda.
Okay, thank you. So I'll call the meeting to order, review of the agenda. I assume that nobody wants to rearrange anything, knowing that we really do need to attend to the employer commissioner seat, the very first thing here. If there isn't. So just a reminder for board members, in case you didn't see the email that came out earlier today. So we've got 5 candidates that we're going to be interviewing tonight, 10 minutes each. That doesn't leave us 6 candidates. Sue corrects me. Thank you. It doesn't leave us a whole lot of time. So 10 minutes with each candidate. I am going to ask, and I hope the board will indulge me, I'm going to go through the same list of questions that we used the last time that we did this. But I really don't think that we have a whole lot of time to allow for board members to shoot in additional questions or to ask for clarifications. Otherwise, we are going to be here together for a very long time tonight. So I'm hoping board members are willing to work with us on that one. The other thing that I will note too is that what I would like the board to do tonight is that we actually have one person that I am not recognizing. Kim.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't recognize you.
That's okay.
So Kim is our first applicant, and I thought she was Kim Gleason, so I let her in.
Okay.
Sorry.
That is no worries. At least that explains. So Kim will get to then hear a little bit about. And Kim, I'll include you on this too. We have need to appoint somebody to the open seat for the employer commissioners. That is the reason why you're here tonight. What we are also going to do at the same time is that there is legislation that is in the works right now in the legislature that would provide for the opportunity for both sides, both the employer commissioners and the employee commissioners, to have 2 alternates appointed as well. And as we speak to each of our applicants tonight, I just wanted to check with them to see if they would be willing to serve in either capacity. Because if that is the case, then tonight what I'm going to ask the board to do after we meet with all the candidates is to actually select 3 folks. 1 person to fill in the employer commissioner seat, and then 2 other folks to serve as alternates. And so maybe Kim, the first thing I'll ask you is, would you be willing to serve in either capacity, or are you interested in only one?
Either capacity was fine with me. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So with that, then,
can I stop you for a moment?
You can.
Sorry, I just wanted to remind Carrie that we're not, this portion is, the interviews are not going to be an open session.
Okay, so do they need to vote to go into executive session, and then I'll turn it off?
Sure. Why don't I take a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Okay, seconded. Moved by Tara, seconded by Don Collins. All those in favor, just give me a yay or raise your hand, or both, please.
Aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
Aye. I am seeing that. So Carrie, we are approved. If you could stop the recording. Moving on to the next item in our agenda is legislative update, and I will turn it over to Sue.
Thank you, Neil. So we're going to focus on 2, not 2 bills, but 2 areas. One of the areas is actually this statewide bargaining, the 2 bills that deal with statewide bargaining for school employees' health benefits. And then the other area is the bills related to the weighting study. But before we get started on that, Sandra was just going to give a quick update on her weekly blog, because you can find lots of information there, and we hope everybody is taking advantage of that. So I'll just hand it over to Sandra for a moment.
Yes, thanks, Sue. I just wanted to check in and ask if there are any questions about accessing the blog, if you're getting notifications, and or if there's anything that seems to be missing that we could tailor to your needs. Jeremy?
Hi, I tried to listen to the podcast this morning on my way to work, and there was some background music, and it seemed to drown your voice out to the point of unable to hear you. Just some feedback.
I heard that from somebody, and when I went back and listened to it, the music is very light, and then all of a sudden at minute 3 it goes whoop. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I let Carrie know that.
Yes, I
Thank
can
you.
adjust that and re-upload it.
Definitely let us know when that happens. Thank you. Hi, Jim.
Hey, I just wanted to say I appreciate it. It was, it was fantastic information, tons of it, and just really happy to have it. I like the new format, so just a thumbs up is all.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
I expected you to do a good job after working with you, and it's very good.
Thanks, Don. Well, don't hesitate to reach out if anyone ever has suggestions or needs help with anything. Over to you, Sue.
Thank you, Sandra. I think everybody's really enjoying having more frequent updates, and it certainly has been helpful because things have been happening very quickly. And there's so many, I think at this point we have over about 70 education related bills. So there's a lot that we're following. So I just wanted to provide an update to you on the bills having to do with the statewide bargaining for school employees' health benefits. Those two bills are H81 and H63. And last week, the House Committee on General Housing and Military Affairs determined that they were going to be working with H81. And H63 was the bill that VSBA favored. What they did was have a side-by-side of the two and worked with them together over the past week or so. Wanted to make you aware that the administration submitted a memo, which was from Suzanne Young, Secretary of Administration, Secretary French from the Agency of Education, Craig Bolio, the Commissioner of the Department of Taxes, and Mike Pichek, the Commissioner of the Department of Financial Regulation. And that memo provided the administration's perspective around the evolution of the statewide bargaining construct and also the financial impacts of H81. And specifically, it stated that establishing sustainability of the plan's costs for employees and taxpayers alike and creating uniformity in cost sharing arrangements to make the benefit easier to administer were foundational principles of the statewide bargaining construct and that they should still apply. And the memo went on to explain that there was a lack of transparency in how the arbitrator's decision was made in the first round of bargaining, that it was made by a single unaccountable individual, and that it had a major impact on school district budgets, which was estimated to add approximately $25 million to the cost in the ed fund. So that memo expressed concerns about the fiscal impacts of the changes that were proposed by H81, particularly striking the provision for uniform cost sharing arrangements for premiums and out-of-pocket costs. And due to those significant financial implications for Vermont taxpayers, the memo recommended that if the bill was voted out of the committee, that the House Committee on Education and the House Committee on Ways and Means should further consider the bill. And VSBA supported that idea that consideration of the bill should be done by the House Committee on Education and Ways and Means in order to fully consider the financial implications. The House Committee on General Housing and Military Affairs also received a lot of written testimony from school officials around the state that cost containment of school employee health benefits is needed in order to avoid further jeopardizing educational opportunities for students, and also avoid jeopardizing maintenance of facilities. And so based on that testimony and the language in H63, VSBA spent a lot of time in that committee requesting that the committee add language to H81 from H63 that would include requiring the parties to submit a full cost estimate of their proposals with a breakdown of the costs borne by the employers and costs borne by employees on a statewide basis, adding specific criteria the arbitrator must consider in making a decision, and requiring the balancing of appropriate access to healthcare benefits and reasonable cost containments, and also requiring the arbitrator to issue a written decision with a full explanation of the basis for the decision, because the last, I'm sure you'll remember, the last decision was very short and didn't have any analysis in it. So to bring you up to date, that committee passed version 2.1 of H81 yesterday afternoon. It does not include the key provisions that we were hoping to get into that bill. And the bill was referred to the Appropriations Committee today. It's likely that the Appropriations Committee is going to limit its review to the $35,000 appropriation that's in the bill to cover the per diems. And that it's not really going to get into the bigger financial implications of the bill. But we are, working to make sure that committee members are educated about the bill, and we are continuing our work on this. It's definitely been a major focus of the past few weeks. So in your packet, you have version 1.1. Version 2.1 is actually what ended up passing out of the committee, and I can send that to all of you if you would like to take a look at it.
So was that vote unanimous to pass it out that way?
It was 10-1. The one who voted against it was Representative Hango, and she's a school board member from, you know her, Don. She's a school board member from your
adjoining
area, right?
district, right? Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Are there any questions on that legislation before I go into the next part of the?
So the only other
presentation?
question I had, whoops, I'm sorry.
Oh, I just wanted to know, once that bill goes on as 81, is there any possibility that some of the pieces in 63 can be added back in by other committees?
Yes, if it goes to another committee. We've been told that there's not a high likelihood that it's going to go to House Education or House Ways and Means, even though that's what we would like to see happen, and that's what the administration memo requested. But we've been told that's probably not likely. But the House General Committee has kept H63 what they call on the wall. So that is good. It's better than if they had just completely voted that bill down. And of course, now it has to go to the Senate as well. So we'll see what happens. It'll probably be voted on by the House within the next week for sure. I think somebody else had a question. Was it Don?
Yeah, no, let it go. It was a question that she had asked. I was
Okay.
wondering if it was going to go to, I think then our job is going to have to be in the Senate to get it into Senate Finance. I've talked to some of those senators. Hopefully they'll take it.
Oh, okay. That sounds good. Thanks, Don.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I was just sort of curious that, with the form that it's coming out in is obviously not our preferred form. Is there any rationale for us urging some of our representatives to not vote for it?
Certainly you can do that. And we may end up sending out some kind of an alert. We're kind of keeping an eye on a couple things before we decide whether to do that or not. It looks, it's not looking likely that it's not going to pass. So But we can certainly, I can certainly talk to you more about that, Jim.
All right, I guess no other questions on that one. I guess you can go on to the next one, Sue.
Okay, so in your packet you have, and I wasn't necessarily expecting you to read all these in great detail, but I included 3 bills that are related to the weighting study. The first one is H54, which proposes to implement recommendations in the weighting study, and it adjusts the existing weight factors and adds the new weighting factors used to calculate equalized pupils. Then there's S13, which proposes to require the AOE to develop a plan to implement the equalized pupil weighting changes that are outlined in the weighting study. And there's H184, which is a little bit of a different type of a bill. It one of the things it does is eliminate the excess spending penalty, which I believe H54 does as well. But it also takes the approach of making requiring the Agency of Education to make 3 separate recommendations on pupil weighting factors and an adequacy amount for all school districts' education spending and education quality standards, including mechanisms for enforcing those standards. And then it also amends the definition of education spending to include the normal contributions to the Vermont Teachers Retirement Fund that are attributable to the employer. So that bill is much longer. It's just starting to be introduced, and House Ways and Means was talking about it today because the primary sponsor is Representative Beck, and he's on that committee. And I'll be testifying tomorrow to the House Education Committee generally on the weighting, on the VSBA's position on the weighting study. And my plan is to focus on what the board has decided to date. So if there's other emphasis that you decide on tonight, I can certainly add that to what I've already written. It's just in draft form at this point. So I believe at this point I can hand it back over to you, Neil, unless there's any questions.
Sure. Any questions for Sue? Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you. So the weighting study is financially impactful in a negative way in my district. And in reviewing the analysis that the Joint Fiscal Office did, it claims that our district has 11.7% poverty rate, yet we have somewhere between 35 and 40% of our students are eligible for free and reduced price lunch. The overwhelming number of those is for free lunch. And I want to, it seems like too big a spread. I understand that the free and reduced price lunch numbers are a bit more generous so that one can not be found to be in poverty and yet eligible for free and reduced price lunch. My concern, though, is that it seems to me that when they identified our district as being 11.7% poverty, they're counting households. And we're not educating households, we're educating students. So I'd like to find a way, and I don't know if the VSBA has this capability or whether I need to go to someone in the Agency of Education to learn where that 11.7% poverty figure for our district comes from.
I think Brad James would be the person to talk to, because he had a question today from one of the representatives in House Ways and Means, and he explained the index or that those figures come from. And you're right, they're not using free and reduced lunch. It's a different measurement. I did not write down what it was, and it's not right in my head right now, but I could take a look at that and let you know, because I think I know how to find it pretty quickly.
Thank you. I'd appreciate that. I'm sure they're not using free and reduced price lunch,
Yeah.
but it would not be correct in my view to use households, because if a household has 3 kids, anyway, I just don't. We're educating kids, not households. So I think using a household income level is not a useful tool, not accurate.
Mark, go ahead.
So a few things. I know JFO is working on updating that analysis for a number of factors. One of the big ones is that it was done before all of Act 46 mergers were in place. So there should be some new numbers coming out very soon. I believe in H54, Sue, that the excess spending threshold is relieved only for 1 year. Unless that has changed, it was just 1 year, at least originally. As far as the topic as a whole is, I don't think anyone here is going to be surprised to say that I strongly support H54. I think it's a very well-balanced approach. It implements it in a relatively slow process over 3 years. And it does have, going to use the wrong term, but quality control standards, QS, I forget what that stands for. But it does include that, and it does have accountability built in with a, I believe it was some sort of committee or commission that was, that's created. So I think it's a very balanced approach. And yeah, I think it's, I'm not going to ask that we support that now because I know it's controversial, but I just want to voice my opinion again. And I think that I think 184 is a pretty awful bill. I could go through it in sections, but I think it's a pretty awful bill. So I'll just leave it at that for now.
Thanks, Mark. Anybody else have any comments or questions on the items related to the weighting study? And so to the point that, or go ahead, Jim.
No, I just want to say I've been, following this sort of carefully along with Mark and all, on the weighting study. So I think, a major issue at this point is just, getting something agreed by the legislature, and that H13 or S13, NH184 both just suggest studies by the Agency of Education. The Agency of Education's already taken a position that they don't have the resources or expertise to do that study, and they've suggested to go outside. H54 comes up with more specifics, but I think I'm just speaking for myself here, in that because our districts are interestingly, Mark is speaking for it. His district isn't really helped by monetarily. Mine isn't either. But getting something moving on the weighting study to at least come up with a plan to implement is, I think, what a lot of people are pushing for. And I just want to say that I think that's important to accomplish, to not have just nothing happen on the weighting study. It's a logical approach, and so I think the legislature just needs to decide something, essentially. So that's what a personal view.
Thanks, Jim. Jeremy, go ahead.
I guess I have a question. What is the financial impact of changing the weighted student count? I mean, I understand what the bill wants to change the way students, so a district will have more students on paper than it had previously or less, but it still costs you what it costs you to educate in your district, and you'll still vote on a budget as a whole. It'll be a higher or lower per student spend. But what is the long-term effect of that?
You want me to take that, or Sue, or I've just seen all kinds of hands go up here. So Jeremy, why don't I will give you sort of my view of the situation here. So you are right. It messes with the equalized pupil count. But in the state of Vermont, the way that we determine what our property tax rates are in large part based on that equalized pupil count, right? So if your equalized pupil count goes up, but your spending level stays the same, then your tax rate goes down. Okay. The point of the weighting study was to identify, I think, some scientifically, some empirically based weights for students based on different characteristics. That would change then for most districts across the state, their equalized pupil number. Some places would see the number go up. Some places would see that number go down. For the places that saw the number go up, the rationale here is that it would generate excess taxing capacity in your town. So for the same tax rate, you could raise more revenue, right? With the hope that districts would not take the tax cut, that they would maintain an additional level of spending to get the same tax rate that they essentially had before, which would generate more revenue for their school to then deal with those students that they haven't been able to fully satisfy before because the weights didn't accurately reflect the cost of actually providing an education to those kids. So what we heard from Tammy Colby was sort of the bottom line takeaway is it generates taxing capacity in your district. It doesn't guarantee you the funds, but it provides a mechanism by which you could raise the money that would be necessary. Dave Sharp, go ahead. I see you have your hand up.
So yeah, I would just add that we've used weighting in the dispersal of education funds in Vermont for probably 40 years, maybe longer. Oh no, in fact, I saw it was given to me in the early 1900s. There was a weighting for students that was used in the dispersal of state dollars for education. Most of the weighting over the years was not particularly scientifically based, and so what my committee did when I was in the legislature was put forth this weighting study to say, look, we need to actually take a scientific or a knowledgeable approach to what students should be weighted. And that's the result of the weighting committee. And it's absolutely the right thing to do, in my view. It's just, I was speaking about my district in particular. It's really important that we have the calculations correct. And so I'm paying attention to that.
Thanks, Dave. Jim Salzgiver, I saw you have your hand up before. Do you still have something? No. Mark Schauber, go ahead.
So Jim brought up my district, and I just wanted to kind of give a couple of disclosures. My district, River Valley's Unified School District, would probably see about level funding. One of our towns would if we're going to go to the winners and losers would be a winner. Their tax rates would quote unquote go down a little bit. My particular town, the town I live in, we'd see our tax rates actually go up. And our select board, the Dover Select Board, has actually hired Nicrason as a lobbying firm. They're paying them a substantial amount of money to lobby for age 54, with the knowledge that our tax rates are going to go up, because they believe so strongly that as a state, we need to be equally educating our students. Last thing I want to say is, in regards to the taxing capacity, there are a lot of people that are saying that a district that gets an increased taxing capacity should essentially be forced to spend that money on education. I believe most districts will, but if you look at the last 20 years, since Act 60, the districts that currently are quote unquote overweighted have had that option. The voters have gotten to choose whether they wanted to pay for additional taxing capacity or not. So to take that option away from the districts now that are going to get the additional taxing capacity, I believe would be completely wrong.
Thanks for that, Mark. And just to piggyback off of that, I will say we had at my local board meeting, we had our two reps just come and give a sort of a rundown of how they saw things going so far in this session. And one of them did mention that one of the conversations going on in the legislature currently is concern about the generation of that excess taxing capacity, and determining whether or not, if this is truly an equity issue that we're trying to solve, that maybe it ought to be done in a different way that doesn't give local communities the chance to choose a lower tax rate over, providing that equitable funding for kids. So I do know that that's one thing that's being talked about right now. Kim, go ahead.
I think the challenge in having that money go to reduce taxes is the cliff-like situation it creates as simultaneously districts are looking to build capacity in subsequent years to serve those students. So I wouldn't profess to know what would be the most appropriate mechanism, but with a statewide funding system and sort of a closed systems of the number of pupils we have, that's redistributing the weights for the purpose of aligning the cost to educate with the resources. And that's, I think, the intent of the weighting. So I would be very concerned to see it going to reduction in taxes.
Mark, go ahead.
I promise this will be the last thing that I say. We have to remember what the Brigham case was about. The Brigham case was about equity in taxing, not equity in education. If you're looking at it from a constitutional perspective, taxes are really what matter. Now, I think we all agree that equity in education is the ultimate goal. And I think you'd find very, very few districts throughout the state that would even consider lowering their taxes if given this opportunity. There are a lot of districts that are working together right now to push this legislation, and not a single one of them is talking about lowering taxes. We're all talking about taking that increased taxing capacity and putting it towards education.
Sorry, Dave, go ahead.
So that's really good to hear, because I think there was a significant amount of money pumped into education, both under the Douglas administration and on the Shumlin administration. And one of the real frustrations of both of those governors was that a lot of that taxing capacity that was created went towards non-educational needs, fixing the town hall, building a fire station, and various non-educational expenses. And the hope then was to have the extra taxing capacity available go towards education. I hope that's not part of this whole. That would be terrible if the extra taxing capacity that was afforded to low-income rural communities was siphoned off, so to speak, to build a new fire station.
Yeah, I also know the challenges I think that all communities are facing during the pandemic, and concerns over property tax rates and such. Any other comments or questions related to the weighting study? We've got previous board positions on this that Sue will be using to inform the testimony that she'll be asked to deliver this coming week.
And those were outlined in your your January meeting board packet.
Yes.
Want to go back and look at them.
All right. I am going to go back to the agenda then and move on to member engagement committee proposal, which was included in your packet. And I think we gave you all a heads up too that this was coming from our last meeting. And would it be looking to Susan or David Chandler to turn it over if you guys wanted to walk us through this possibly?
I can do that if that's all right, Susan.
Absolutely.
So I hesitate to read this because I know how boring reading can be, but I'll summarize it pretty quickly. There are two questions that we have. First of all, the member engagement committee was formed in response to a priority need that was articulated at the VSBA staff retreat in December all the way back to 2019, which seems like a long time ago. Over the past year, we've done a number of things, including developing and administering a needs assessment survey. And it has also supported Susan's redoubled efforts to demonstrate the value of the VSBA, which she has done through, and I've listed the bullet points of the different webinars and updates and the emailing of the legislative updates. Maybe that's not just Susan, that's probably more Sandra. But there have been a lot of things coming out of the VSBA. And we believe that providing these valuable services and offering much needed support, it's a great way to send the message that the VSBA adds value simply because it does. So that was the main thing I wanted to say. But then we started to try to, so the rest of it explains that we were trying to see, well, what gaps are there? And the main gap seemed to be in the ability for board members throughout the state to network. And so Susan did some research and discovered a package by a company. Well, I don't know, it's here somewhere, but the main point is that there's this package that offers a community package would allow us to ease into the use of this networking tool, creating groups that people could join to engage in discussions. So what we wanted from this meeting in answer to the first question was, does the purchasing of a networking platform at this time make sense? And if so, will you authorize the membership engagement committee to spend the initial $8,000 for the subscription fee for the basic package? So that's question one that I had for the board, that we had for the boards, not me. It's the engagement committee. Do you want to add anything, Susan?
Well, I will just say that the tool that I have come up with is actually one that's in use by several state board associations and the National School Boards Association. And so those of us on staff have familiarity with it because we are all engaged in online communities. I'm part of the trainers group and also part of the superintendent searchers group. Sandra is involved in the policy group and I think another one also. Sue has an executive directors group. And so there are different communities. VSBA has created them based on function, but we have total latitude to create them as is appropriate for us. The first one that came to mind, because I've actually had specific requests, was for school board chairs around the state to be able to contact other school board chairs on issues that they may be confronting, that they're just looking for a sounding board, or they're looking for some input from someone who might be a little further ahead in the process. And so on a few occasions, they've said, can you put me in touch with other board chairs who are dealing with this issue? And I've been able to do that, but we don't always know. And there's no reason that they need a middleman. So this platform allows somebody who's a member of that community, they call it, to be able to put a request out to the whole membership of that community, and anybody is free to respond. And as with so many of these, you know, they have a lengthy complement of tools. And so what I've opted for in my participation through NSBA is a daily digest email. Now, I could have them pinging me every time anybody posts anything, but I'd never get anything done. But at 6 o'clock every morning, there's an email in my inbox that gives me the threads of the day and who's asking what question and what people have responded. And, you know, and it's really been very helpful. In fact, that's really how we found the Arizona School Boards Association to come in and do our your board retreat last month, was through that kind of a connection. And so, you know, my mind goes to finally we'd be able to connect all of you, the boards who are dealing with small schools issues, for example, or policy governance boards, or you name it. And so people would have each other as resources. And you know, continuously the feedback that we get on our in-person conferences is we wish there had been more time for networking. You know, I don't need to tell anybody how hard the job of school board is and how misunderstood it often is. And so the idea of being able to communicate with your peers statewide seems like something that would help VSBA seem valuable to people who aren't yet seeing value in it. And that's really what my goal was when we started talking about membership engagement.
Thank you for that. And I don't know, were there any other members from the member engagement committee that wanted to add anything to this? So yeah, so we've had the proposal before us. Oh, sorry, Amy, go ahead. I saw your hand pop up.
Yeah, as far as having a community group such as this, I belong to a few groups, town clerks and libraries, at like probably 3 or 4 different library email groups, and they are very helpful when you want some sort of question answered, and you almost always get a response immediately. And you can either, you have to use your best judgment on whether or not you're going to implement the information, but it's still really useful, and it does create a sense of community above and beyond just your single board.
Thanks, Amy. I'm going to turn it over to Sue. Sue and I had a chance to talk earlier today. She had reached out to other state associations to find out who was doing something similar and how it was going for them. So you had your hand up. I sure hope that I provided the appropriate segue here now that I did all of that.
You did great. So I actually used the NSBA version of what Susan is talking about to put a question out to the executive directors of all of the other state associations in the United States. And I got 17 replies. So I just wanted to sort of summarize them for you. There were 10 that said, no, they do not do this. Some of them were very emphatic that their attorneys would never let them do this, and that they were worried about discussions that would violate the open meeting law. Others of them said they used to have one, but they had very little use or little participation. There was one Illinois that said that they bring board chairs together on Zoom to facilitate conversations on timely topics. But then there were 6 that said that they do have some kind of version of this. One of them was Massachusetts. They said about 30% of their membership participates in their listserv, but they only have about 4 to 5 people that really respond regularly, that their email blasts seem to reach more members more effectively, but that the fact that they have a listserv gives the appearance of providing a service to their membership. Montana said they use something called Higher Logic Communities, just as NSBA does, and that they get nearly 80 posts a day, and that they have to moderate those posts and enforce terms of use. Connecticut said it subscribed to something else, which is called Simple Lists, and that it's been very successful, especially for chairs. And that it was less than $200 a year to create as many lists as they wanted. Ohio said they had lists in the listservs in the past, little participation. They currently use groups in Facebook. Oregon uses listservs for regions, and Oklahoma has a group online forum. But to avoid open meeting law violations, they only provide access to the current chair of each board. So they don't have like multiple board members from a board participating in it, that it's just the current chair. So you could think about dividing things up in a way that doesn't have several board members from one board getting into a conversation. So I just wanted to provide that information that I got from sending out that question.
Thank you for that, Sue. Any board members have any questions based on that information? Oh, look, it looks like Don Collins has got his internet access back. Mark, go ahead.
So a question and then a comment. If we were to use this piece of software, which it looks like was maybe produced by the NSBA, would that provide access to other state boards for our boards?
No, this is not actually, this is third party. It's not part of NSBA. They just happen to use this same provider, which is called Higher Logic. Sue mentioned it, that some Montana's using it, a couple of other states. So no, we would have self-contained communities.
Okay. So then my comment is $8,000 seems awfully expensive. I've done a lot of web development in my life, and for $50 you could set something up. Simple Lists is a great service.
I will look into that.
That is very reasonably priced. So if we were looking at something, you know, in the $500 range, I probably wouldn't say anything, but 8,000 just seems out of the realm of reasonable price. I think the concept is great. I love it. And I absolutely think we should implement something. I think $8,000 is too much for what we'd be getting out of it.
Thanks, Mark. Adrian.
I know the municipal sites all use UVM's listserv, and I don't believe they get charged. I know I belong to the municipal officials and to the zoning administrator site, and they're used fairly frequently. I mean, I probably get emails, you know, maybe 1 or 2 a week from one or the other. You know, there's always, but I don't believe that I'm not sure if they cost anything. I can send that information.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, if you could share that with Susan and maybe Sue as well too, it might be beneficial to know. Any other comments or thoughts on this, Colleen?
Yeah, I was just going to mention University of Vermont's listserv. I subscribe to an IT listserv, and it's really, I get the daily news feed. You can choose not to read the daily news feed, or you can choose to just skim through what are the headers. And it's incredibly helpful when you're trying to do problem solving on particular issues, whatever it is that you're working on. And University of Vermont has I don't know how many dozens, but there are many. You can actually go to the site and look at the listservs, but it's text-based. It's very simple, incredibly useful. I like the idea of being able to network in a simple format and getting, Susan, you said the daily digest. It's just information. We're not looking for any fancy graphics. We're just looking for a way to connect with people with basic knowledge, right?
Right, but
So
it would,
I agree with Mark. I think 8,000 feels a little high for the function. But it's, maybe it's money well spent.
If I could jump in,
Yep.
I think this is very helpful actually, because first of all, you've affirmed that we're moving in the right direction, but you've also indicated that we need to do a little bit more homework, and that's fine. We'll go back to the drawing board. We've found in our learnings that member engagement is a challenge, and it's very hard to figure it out. So I don't feel daunted by this at all. In fact, I feel affirmed. So thank you very much for this. I'm happy, Susan, for us to leave it like this. And Amy, I don't know how the rest of you feel, but we can go back. We can go back to the drawing board. You all right with that? So we don't need a motion.
but I'd also like to welcome anybody else to participate in that committee who's interested, because with the elections in the fall, we did lose a couple of members. So please just drop me a note and I will add you to that list.
Let me check. Gaston, did you still have something?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I'm kind of wondering about the tail end of this. How would you roll this out? So, I hear that when you have in-person area regional meetings, that there is this need for, networking. So how would you, build this so that you would get, the membership using it? I guess would be my question. Over.
Well, I think the critical thing will be creating the right communities. So if it strikes a chord, as I mentioned, I know there's, the small schools communities are scattered around the state. There's not any geographic place that makes any sense for you all to meet up. And yet you share issues, for example. So that one comes to mind. I mean, I think as regional representatives, it provides, we could do regions, which gives you ready access to the members in your regions. And that too is another way to envision this. But I think it was our expectation that we would start slowly and probably with board chairs and just sort of debug whatever platform it is that we're going to use and get on it, and then probably seek input from the membership to find out what kind of communities have shared issues, because that makes it relevant.
Policy might be another area.
Thanks, Gary. Yep, Mark.
Yeah, to kind of build on what Gaston and Susan were saying, my suggestion would be you start with the school board chairs, you get them actively involved in it, and you let them be the advertising to get other members on board. Otherwise, starting whether it's regional or not, I think you're going to get very few people. But I think the board chairs are a second group that that would be great. And Susan, I don't necessarily want to be on the committee, but if you want any help from a web perspective, I'm more than happy to help out.
Great, thank you.
Adrian.
I just wanted to put a push in for negotiation chairs as opposed to just school chairs, because negotiation chairs are in tough shape these days.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So what I'm going to propose here is one. So I know that it sounds like folks were interested in this, but maybe interested in a lower cost alternative. So if the member engagement committee wouldn't mind maybe looking into some options there, I think it would be good. The second thing is timing wise, I think it might be appropriate to pull this into the work that the budgeting committee is going to be doing in very short order to see how it might fit in a more sustainable nature. If we're going to start to fund something like this, rather than just a one-year thing, let's take a look at maybe a multi-year thing. The final thing that I want to put in here, and this is, I hate to be the guy that brings it all down, right? But I have some serious concerns about violation of open meeting law using something like this. We all know that engaging in an email discussion amongst board members can quickly violate that. And I don't want to be the head of an organization that helps facilitate violations of the open meeting law, if at all possible. So I do think that there's some aspect of either our use of it or how we employ the use of it to make sure that we're not setting up board members to get into trouble. Now, I don't know if that involves maybe, Sue taking a look at things with a legal hat on, or if we ask some other attorneys, familiar with open meeting law to opine on the whether or not it's even possible to restrict access to this such that we don't, facilitate the issues that I think we're possibly worried about. Susan.
So my expectation was that I would curate the conversations. And so like a front porch forum that you can post something, but it doesn't go live until somebody on the inside has looked at it and verified it, and they reject some things. That's sort of the expectation I had, which means that if three people from the same SU are chattering, that is not something that we would allow to go forward.
Yep. So
And that
those
would
are
be
the
our
types of
protection.
things. Yeah, I think those are the types of things that you want to bring forward for discussion to find out whether or not there's a legal way that we can employ something like this that's of value, but also doesn't get board members in trouble at the same time. So if it's something that member engagement committee would be willing to look into, I think that would be a reasonable next step along with the budgeting piece of things. All right. David, is that sufficient for this evening? Did you want to touch on the other point as well too, or?
Well, I do want to touch on the other point, but I don't think we have time to do that. And I'm very conscious of the time. It's a longer discussion, but to summarize it quickly, the intent was to begin to try to figure out what kinds of routine things we should all be performing with our regional members, co-members. And how often should we reach out? What do you think about it? Because it takes a lot of time. So I've put some ideas out there. If you take time to read it, then we would love to have feedback, or if it's appropriate, have a discussion at a later meeting. But so that's the second issue that we raised and wanted feedback for, or from you all for.
Okay, thank you for that. I think I am, in the interest of time, I think I am going to defer that one, but please, board members, read through the proposal that was included in the packet so that you're familiar with the item, and then we will bring it forward again at a future board meeting for some further discussion. I want to thank the member engagement committee. You guys have done a great job, and I appreciate the work that you've done to bring forward to the board tonight, so thank you very much. All right. I am going to move along in our agenda this evening, and next up is diversifying the educator workforce. Flora, do we have was our guest able to join us this evening?
She's in the waiting room. Oh, there she is.
Oh, perfect. So by way of just maybe teeing up a brief introduction for folks tonight, Flora and Jess are here this evening to talk to us about some work that they've been doing regarding education workforce diversity. And I think that there's a couple of tie-ins here with the work that the VSBA has recently done through our equity training. But I also think that there's an opportunity here for board members to begin to think about possible participation or collaboration in the work that's going on here and what Flora and Jess will introduce to us tonight. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Flora to then take care of the introductions for us.
Thank you. Thank you, Neil. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Sorry, my internet just suddenly there. So thank you for giving us the time. I know that we are really pressed for time tonight, so we'll try to be super quick. We have a quick presentation and we're just gonna try to go like super fast through it. So with that said, and as we start, I'll introduce Jess as we start that presentation. So, you know, we're super excited of being able to present this to you today. You know, this really represents a commitment from this group to start this work and to be really committed to equity and anti-racism work, not just in Vermont, but in New England. So if we go to the next slide, there we go. Yeah. So I'm now gonna introduce Jess, was one of the chairs as you see it here in our report. So I'm gonna let Jess do the first part of our report and let her introduce herself. She was the chair with Ventura as we started this work, and she was the one that tapped to me while I had my hiatus from the VSBA to join the work. So Jess, if you wanna take the driving.
Sure. And so hi, everybody. I'm Jess DeCarolis. I'm Division Director of the Student Pathways Division at the Agency of Education. And the Agency of Education is part of the New England Secondary Schools Consortium, which is a 6-state consortium of state education agencies. And I don't know who's driving the bus, but great. So, you know, what we're describing here is actually the regional task force that was brought together. This is the Vermont team that represented Vermont as part of that 6-state consortium, where teams from each state in New England came together to collaborate on and engage in a community of practice to engage the public, promote policy change, and offer practice changes. And so part of the NESI work is really about improving secondary outcomes for students, and especially to promote educational equity. And so as part of this work in 2018, 2019, Vermont was very much interested in thinking about how we might animate some of the reports that had come out beginning in 2000. So UVM had put out a report, and most recently the 2017 report on diversifying state level workforce. And particularly there was a piece on education, and this came out of the Human Rights Commission and the Attorney General's office. And so by convening a task force, the idea was that we would meet over the course of 10 months to really put forward a report that could identify a vision in which all 6 states could collaborate to move the needle on diversifying the educator workforce. Is that for me, Flora? Is that yours?
Yeah, and we can go quick on this one.
Sure.
They had the opportunity to see the report.
Okay, great. I think the next slide. And the impetus behind this is we know that there's already a fairly extensive body of research around why actually diversifying the educator workforce not only improves outcomes for students of color or diverse students, but for all students. And what we're seeing is that consistently nationwide, there is a disparity between what our enrollment of students and students of color are compared to the educator workforce. And so what you see here is a national representation. Next slide. And I think here what you can see from Susanna Davis, she pulled this together, is that really the trends in Vermont are replicating what we're seeing nationwide. So when you look at some of these columns, you're seeing profound growth in Vermonters of color, and a sort of shrinking or not the same amount of growth of the white Vermont population. And so when we see that we have such enormous disparity between our populations of students of color compared to our educators of color, we see that we're not prepared or positioned well to address what we know are trends in population growth.
So the report was set around these grounding principles, which are really my favorite part of the report. And you get, I think not everybody got a chance to read the report, but if you have the time, you know, you don't have to take it all at once. You can do it in sections. So I'm gonna just concentrate in this. So the grounding principles is commit to equity, which we've been working on that, acknowledge the harm the system has perpetrated and continues to perpetrate on our identity in all of its forms. And hopefully the rest is coming. Engage equitably, be an anti-racist, and measure, share, and reflect on the data, evidence of progress in a transparent manner, which we are all doing across our districts. So next slide, Carrie, please. So these are the grounding principles. And like I was saying, you could take the report one quarter of the pie at a time. So don't feel like you have to read it all at once. And you know, the main reason really, as you can see, the audience, it doesn't have to be just teachers, right? We need everybody working together, because one of the main things is that we need to make it sustainable in Vermont for the educators to stay here. So, and we also need board leadership, and the board leadership matters because we can make sure that we have the resources necessary to support the people that have both positional and dispositional leadership in our organizations to do the work. And also engaging our communities in the conversation is important to advancing the work in our state to ensure that we're not only working towards equity in our schools, but in our community as a whole. So next slide. We had the opportunity with a larger group. So the mighty small group of Vermont has grown now, and we have people from higher ed and different people, and we were able to animate the reports through this series, this webinar. So we had 3 webinars, and I included, and I can send it to you guys, but I included the links, maybe just to Sue and to Neil, to the webpage, and you can see the webinars that happen in this in November 17 and December 15 and the 12th. And we have a webpage now where all of the work that we've been doing lives in great parts thanks to the work of Mark and Wen from the Great Schools Partnership. Next slide. And the only reason I included this today is like Neil was saying, I participated today as part of the NSBA in representing us in the NSBA Equity Online Symposium. And I was trying to take a picture of the other slide, which was really about diversifying Teachers Matter. And DIRE is the one initiative that they have right now at New England and the National School Boards Association too, which should also be tied into, and I know, Neil, you're probably participating in that. And basically what it means is dismantling institutional racism in education. So what I'm trying to say is that all of the things come together, at least for us. So we it would be great if we could partner with this work. And Jess, you're more eloquent at this than me. So do you have any final thoughts for them?
Yeah, I guess I would say that this work really demonstrated that we don't always have to wait for legislative action in order to make change, and that often by engaging the public, by thinking about those small measures where we can change our practice, that we can make pretty substantial change. When I had first reached out to pull together a representative Vermont team for the regional work, actually the invitation went out to a much larger group, and I was so thankful for the response and for Floor's participation that we had, even though it was a small team. But I think what we saw is that by being able to pull together this task force, that really cultivated a sense of interest. People felt like they could rally around something. And I think we have an opportunity now that matches our values, which is, what are those things? And particularly, we've talked about that dispositional versus positional power. And that frequently it's the dispositional power, the dispositional authority that can affect change by influencing those around us, by modeling the behaviors that we're looking for. I'll say in 2015, the agency engaged in a equity study. And what we found is that in our high minority schools, we actually had the highest rates of experienced educators who are highly qualified and appropriately assigned. And I think that that speaks to our values, which is, yes, we know that it's important that we give people the support that they need when they need it. I think what we need to recognize now, though, is that it's very important that every learner sees themselves in the education space.
So with that, I don't know if you guys have any questions.
Yeah, so why not open up for board members that might have questions for Flora or Jess? Gaston, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. I guess the only thing that kind of gave me a gut check, if you will, was our first review of bills that were being considered. And we had a number of legislators from the Northeast Kingdom who are putting forth this notion that flying any flag other than the US flag at our schools, taking, i.e. the Black Lives Matter flags out of the equation because it's politicized. It seems to me that it's just doing the opposite and politicizing that, which I am just not in favor of, right? I mean, that to me just sort of is antithetical to what you all are talking about. So I guess my question would be, how is that bill progressing? And is that something that you all are sort of following to make sure that, we don't quite get to that point? Over.
We did talk about it at our last meeting. That's not something that we have control on. We don't think that the bill is going to see, it's going to get in the floor at all. But that bill is out there, at least for me personally, it means that this work is really important, right? So that demonstrate why this work is important. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, and if I could just add, and I appreciate everybody letting me take any of your time, yes. is historically we have seen this, right? So, after Brown v. Board of Education, you saw an increase of activity with the KKK. After the 1960s, civil rights movement, you saw a burst of extremism, et cetera. Even after Barack Obama's election, these are pretty common cycles. And so what I would say is that staying the course, right? Not being intimidated, expecting that will be a natural sort of pushback, understandably, right? But look what happened on January 6th, right? Which is we have multiple literacies coming into action: media literacy, financial literacy, civic literacy, just literacy rates. 58% of adults are reading at sixth grade level or below, and that's costing us $2.2 trillion, right? So I think that what we just need to do is stay the course, move the needle, and not necessarily give oxygen all the time to things that we know are just a natural consequence of progress.
Perfect.
Colleen, did you have a point?
Yeah, just thank you for the presentation. And it seems like you're doing incredibly great work. And I'm just wondering if your group has started to focus on that pipeline of teachers into the system. And for example, with Winooski and Burlington having 50 languages or more spoken other than English, there were a number of people at UVM that used to talk, a number of years ago, about trying to recruit new Americans into the system. And I don't think anyone quite has figured out how to do that. And so I'm sure there may be conversations, but if you're not there yet, I think it would be just really exciting to think about how to be recruiting new Americans into the system, and what role can boards play. And in this vision, I can see some kind of fellowship program that could be, a network of people supporting each other. I think our schools are ready for something different. So just thank you for the work and keep going. And I hope we get further reports.
Thank you, Colleen.
Thanks. Any other board member comments, questions? No. So, Flora, I know one of the things is that this group has reached out to other educational organizations in Vermont. I'm thinking like VSA, VPA, and such, and to get them to, either buy in or endorse the efforts of this group. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that was part of my email. Yeah, that was the hope that we would be able to, add our organization. You already by default sort of have representation, so it would be so it would be nice. It doesn't mean that that we are all experts, right? Because we're all in this together. We're all learning. So it doesn't mean that anybody is the expert. It's just that now is the time. So.
Yep. So I think what I want to do is, use that as an ask to this board. And I don't think that we need to take this up for decision this evening, but I do want to push it forward to a future VSBA board meeting as to whether or not, there's a role here for the VSBA board body to actually endorse the efforts of what's going on here and show support, in various ways. And if, I guess basically what I'm saying now is to tee up that discussion for a future board meeting and for board members to anticipate that that's coming and to think about that and plan for it. So,
great.
Jim, go ahead.
Oops, unmuting here. Okay. Yeah, I was just curious of whether that could tie in with the Vermont Community Foundation funded program with VSA and VPA and all, whether that's potentially a good connection.
I would have to defer to Sue on that one.
Yeah, it definitely could. You should have received, I believe it was today or yesterday, my days are blending together, an email with a survey connected with the grant from Vermont Community Foundation. So I'd encourage everyone to answer that survey, and that's going to be helping us to identify how we're going to move forward.
Thanks. Any other questions or comments from board members on this? Adrian, go ahead.
I mean, that one little piece of information of the increased KKK action after the Board of Education makes me feel 100% better. I'm in the Mill River District, and one of the sponsors of that bill has also been involved in a concerted effort to get to take over the board, one of those delightful activities. And to look at it somewhat in a positive view is really helpful. It's an answer to our work. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for letting us present tonight. And thank you, Jess, because you're super busy.
No, thank you all.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Thanks for joining us on a school night. We appreciate the work that you've done here.
Okay. Have a good one.
Thanks. All right, board, going to move on in the agenda to the strategic plan monitoring report.
So Neil, I think given the late hour, I'm not going to go through the report, but encourage everyone to take a look at what's been happening.
Yep. Please, if you haven't had a chance yet, go in and take a look. We really do a great job of outlining the efforts of the organization and making sure that they are aligned with the board goals that we've set for ourselves. All right, let me move on then to the consent agenda. In there we have our January minutes. I would look for a motion.
I'll move the consent agenda, Jim Salzgeber.
Second by Mark Schauber. Any discussion? All those in favor of the consent agenda, please say yay.
Yay.
Yay. Man, that's so unnatural. People don't want to say yay. Tara Sweet's got a new background. New business. Any other items that board members want to bring forward? Certainly we could consider for future board meetings. Gessa.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about e-finance. I sent Sue an email today, but that's something that we've been talking a lot about at the SU level, and our superintendent has actually written a letter of support to sort of put this off until we know for sure exactly the capabilities of this program so that it doesn't move us backwards. And so there's a lot of concern, as I understand it, growing regarding it. So I kind of wonder if we couldn't perhaps talk about that. Over.
Sure. Flora, go ahead.
Building bright futures. So we had talked before about it. So it would be something similar, just like a quick update, or maybe even invite somebody else from, I think it's really good for everybody to be informed of the report and just have, like just some highlights, if that's okay.
Okay. Anything else? I do realize it's a late hour. Just briefly, I just do want to mention, I know that we went through equity training. I know that we had a little bit of a presentation tonight on stuff. We have not forgotten about equity on this board. I think one of the things that's hit us rather hard this year, and I don't know that we even really necessarily saw it coming, the amount of legislation going on right now related to education is overwhelming. And we've got a very small staff that's doing a great amount of work to stay on top of everything. But unfortunately, there are limits to their capacity, and we're not able to get to everything all at once. And so I have not forgotten about equity. This group has not forgotten about equity. We are going to continue that effort. We just need to get through, I think, some of the difficult parts of this legislative session first, in order to be able to get some capacity back to continue that work. So I just wanted to put that out there, that we haven't not forgotten about it. Mark, go ahead.
Since you brought equity up, I was wondering whether the Arizona VSBA has a shorter version of that program. RSU, Wyndham Central, has been talking about trying to bring something down to Wyndham County. So just interested whether there's a shorter version.
I don't know if there's a shorter version. We're definitely, working on building some resources, and the grant that we received is going to help us do that. But it's going to take us a little while to do that. But no, I don't know. I don't know whether there's a shorter program from Arizona School Boards Association. I can tell you, I think it was listed in the strategic plan that we have now on our website, an equity webpage. I don't know if you've checked that out at all, Mark, but it has some good resources on it also.
And I think it's in May that we have a equity webinar.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
And certainly did not want to make it seem like we're doing nothing on the topic. We still are. Just we got a lot going on with a very small staff. Before we go tonight, I just actually want to make a point to say thank you to the staff, because these last several weeks have been incredibly busy, and our staff is doing an amazing job to stay on top of all of this stuff. And so I really thank them for the work that they're doing. Thank you, folks. All right. I don't have anything else at this point in time. If nobody else does, we just have a matter of a motion to adjourn to attend to.
Did you do the consent agenda?
Did we not vote on it?
I don't think so. I'm not positive though.
No, we did. I said, hey, everybody say yay.
You did. You did. Carrie, I got it.
Thank you. Sorry.
I got a couple of yay like that, but yeah. So it was there. It was passed, Carrie. Flora, go ahead.
I just want to say thank you, Neil.
Oh, you're welcome, Flora.
Well, you're also carrying a lot. So yeah.
Yes, Neil is carrying a lot for sure.
No worries. That's why you guys pay me the big bucks. So. All right. How about a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. By who did that? Oh, Kim.
That's Kim. Sorry.
Seconded by Adrian Raymond. All of those in favor. Just click the little red leave button in the lower right hand.
Thanks,
corner.
everybody. Bye.
Night,
You
everyone.
guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks. Stay well, everyone.
Yes. Bye.